Welcome to Into the Mythic. I'm Leanne O'Donnell, and this is the second episode in a new podcast series about Irish mythology and folklore. I'm with Polo Coleman. Polo is a poet, a musician, an artist, and a lover of Irish mythology, and we're coming to you from a small village on the southwest coast of Ireland. Through storytelling and conversation, we're trying to get back to the beating heart of our ancient myths. Last week we explored the story of a king with a dreadful secret and a willow tree that released the hidden truth with the help of a musician. This week we'll be staying with the theme of trees and woodlands by looking at the story of Sweeney, the king who was turned into a bird. Parts of Sweeney's story are very old indeed, but it's thought that the version we have now was first written down in medieval Ireland, around the 12th century AD. During this period of Irish history, Christianity was really thriving, monasteries were flourishing and becoming wealthier, and along with that gaining great power and influence. It was a time when the old ways, many of which had coexisted with Christianity since the time of the early missionaries like St. Patrick, were being supplanted by the new order. Sweeney was the king of Dalriada, a kingdom that encompassed the western seaboard of Scotland and what we now call County Antrim in Northern Ireland. He was a man of wealth and standing, and his fall from grace was quite spectacular. I found this quite a magical story. It's about metamorphosis, about a man being transformed into a bird. And it has some really deep messages for me about the challenge for human beings of finding a place between the wilderness and civilization. It may be set over 1,000 years ago, but for me it has some very pertinent resonances about the challenge of being a human today. About how to honour our inner wildness and the wild world around us, while at the same time living in an increasingly complex and controlled world.
The madness of King Sweeney, as it's called, he represents in the story the old order, and the new religion was coming in at this stage, and he resisted the new religion. He hates the new priests, the new form of religion, and sort of rebels or certainly resists it. One day he's absolutely outraged. He's lying in bed with his wife, and he hears hammering and sawing, and he's so angry that he just throws on his cloak around him. He's naked, leaves the bed and races to find out what it is, and he finds, as his suspicion was, that it's a cleric who's arrived in the area who had asked him for some land called Ronan, who's building a church, cutting down his trees to build a church. So he beats him soundly. He gets the holy book, the Bible, throws it into a nearby lake. As he's doing this, the cloak falls off him, and so he's naked and beating this hapless cleric. And his wife comes and drags him off because she understands the new order a bit better, and she pulls him off. And a knotter, the story tells us, rescues the book and brings it to Ronan. And Ronan, bleeding and injured and angry, pulls himself up onto his knees, and in a fit of an early showing of Christian forbearance, he brings down a curse on Sweeney, and he says, you came to me like a naked beast. You can live like a beast. With the curse, then he depending on the version of the story, he either turns Sweeney into a bird, or Sweeney believes he's turned into a bird, and the effect really is the same, whether you're turned into a bird or whether you just believe it. Sweeney then has to leave people because birds don't live with people, they're wild. So he leaves, and he lives in the woods, and he lives off berries and off leaves and off watercress. And at different times he covers the whole of Ireland, and different people meet him and see him. At one stage his wife has him caught and brought home, but they have to keep him in a cage like a wild bird because and even though he loves her, he just can't stay because he needs to get away. And there's one very sad bit it's a big long poem, beautifully translated by Seamus Heaney at one stage actually, but he's sitting up in the tree and he's looking in the bedroom, his own bedroom, and his wife is with a lover, and he understands that she's not going to just wait for him, but it breaks his heart, but he can't go in, he can't approach her, and he has his human form, but he's all covered in mud and sticks and bits of feathers to keep himself warm, and he just has to sadly go away.
It's such an amazing story in lots of ways. I mean, the kind of one part of it is this conflict between the old order and the new order, and who gets to tell the stories. The victor gets to tell the stories.
Exactly.
So in this story, the curse of the incoming saint was more powerful than Sweeney's power.
Yes.
Yeah, and so he was the one who suffered. He was
the
one
old
who,
magic is defeated in this one.
But in the other way, it's also an incredible insight into this this incredible ability to change shape and to metamorphise, because he got to then be part of these woodlands. He got to go and live in this wild form.
Yeah.
There must have been good things about that. I mean, as well as the longing, looking back in at the wife and the human life he can't have, there must have been an amazing freedom in that too.
There must have been. And also we're reading the as you say, the victor's version. So if somebody thinks that the old order, well, they have to believe the old order is beneath them, is less than they are, that the people are more barbaric and so on. So to me, to live in the woods like that sounds like a really nice way to do it. I mean, I'm not sure I could manage it, but it certainly appeals to me on a certain level.
Me too, actually. So when I hear that, I think, is that a curse or a blessing?
Yes.
To get to go and believe that you're really part of that ecosystem.
Yes.
I look at that and think that sounds like not a bad way to spend a few years.
Exactly. A bit lonely for his family and his wife, but...
Oh, she had a lover.
Well, and they chose not to go with him, I suppose, as well. We're not able to explore the background of the story because we're just given, well, there are a couple of versions, but we're given a version written by, as we say, the victors. And actually, even with it, coming back to Woods, one of the reasons he's banished as well is the army are being mustered. His king, a lord higher than him, calls on him to fulfil his duties, obligations, and bring soldiers to fight a battle against a rival king. So he turns up with his people, and there is the bold Ronan with the bell, and the bell. The Christian bell, he hates the sound of it because it's unnatural. And actually, when we think of bells nowadays, it's all the ding 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 ding, the beautiful bells. But we didn't have the ability to cast bells in Ireland at that stage. So bells were made out of metal, but they were very crude and very rough, and they just had kind of a clanking. It was more like tin can sound. So maybe he just hated that sound. It was unmusical to him. But he took his spear, which was made of ash, as all spears are, because it's long and true and straight, and he flings it. It goes through the bell and through the man who was ringing it and through a couple of other monks who were behind him. So he kills a line of people.
Wow.
With the spear.
So the power of the ash spear
penetrates right through
the bell of Christianity.
The bell of Christianity and the purveyors of Christianity.
Wow. There's something very significant in that, isn't there? Paul, I want to go back, if we can, to what Sweeney's lived experience in the woods was like. What was it like for him to be in the woods? Do we know, how can we evoke what his experience was like?
Well, he spent 7 years in the wilds, and he lived hand to mouth. He lived on watercress and berries and leaves, and he mentions all kinds of things which nowadays we wouldn't consider edible, but he loved them, and at times had battles of wits with people who were picking his cress or picking the berries. There was one cleric, for instance, and they had a big set to verbally, and there was another woman at another stage. But he quite often he waxes lyrical and poetic when the times are really hard, when there's snow on the ground, when he's torn by brambles and briars and so on, and he's bleeding and cold and hurt and hungry and feeling it all, and it overwhelms him. And I suppose, like everybody, you write your best poetry when you're feeling miserable. But at other times he writes about the beautiful places and his favourite places, and they were scattered not only around this country but over in Scotland and down through Britain. And he talks about the beauty of the birds singing in the trees and the greenness of the grass and the hillsides and the mountains and how beautiful they were.
So there's a sense that he really lived as a wild creature, in that when you speak about the battle for resources, the trying to find the food and the shelter, there's a real wildness to it, isn't there? There
is a wildness. And at one stage he went to a place in his own former territory, and it was kind of Glown and Yalth kind of place, a place where the mad convened and came, and it was very sheltered and full of all kinds of shelters and caves and lots of food, and there were lots of other mad people there. I'm using this term, from the poem itself, and they not exactly fought with each other, but tried to outdo each other to get to the food source, to get the best places to sleep, and so on.
I'm thinking, it's interesting you use the word mad, and what's clear, I think, in the narrative is that Sweeney has been exiled from civilization. He's been exiled from how you live in groups. He's been sent away. But you say that he goes to woods all over Ireland and Scotland. So his territory or his range is quite extensive, but he just has to be in the woods, is it?
He has to stay away from people. And of course, at that stage, like this, we're talking about the 5th century, the middle of the 5th century. And so the whole countryside and large parts of Britain would have been covered in woodlands. So he just was avoiding people, and the best place to avoid people in those days was to go into the depths of the woods.
Wow. It's quite extraordinary. It's really extraordinarily vivid idea that you have to forsake the human settlement and go into this wildness.
Yeah.
And this was his curse.
It was his curse, and yet how much of that is our modern interpretation of that, or the slant put on it by the people who eventually, hundreds of years later, wrote down, reinterpreted the story and committed it to paper or parchment or vellum or whatever it was, because for the Gael back then in that era, most of their poetry is about nature and being out in nature, and the lays of the Fianna, those poems about the Fionn McCool and his band of Fianna, they lived outside most of the time. They had their dunes and forts where they visited and stayed, but mainly they were out on the hillsides, loving nature, being part of nature, hunting, fishing, lying on hillsides in the sunshine and so on.
Yeah, I think when you speak about him waxing lyrical about the times of hardship, that kind of evokes it quite well. It's that sense that when you're in these extreme situations, you feel very alive. So there's the hardship is, it makes him feel alive. It makes him feel connected.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the comforts of civilization, but he has maybe this opened up sensitivity to what it is to be alive.
Exactly. And actually at one stage he visits his wife, and she is with another man, and the other man was also a contender for the kingship which Sweeney had before his unfortunate lapse. And she's with him, and he calls to her and begins a conversation, but he's sitting in a tree outside her window, and she tries to inveigle him in, but he won't be fooled because he's been caught before and held and manacled and chained, I suppose in an effort to cure him for his own good, well-meaning, but he doesn't want this, like a wild thing. He wants to get away. But he's speaking with her, and he's saying, you promised that you'd be with me, and I do understand that you're with him, but what about all those times we were together and all the love we had? And she says, I'd gladly go with you now if you'd let me. But he doesn't want her to be there because he can't be with anybody.
That's really complicated. I mean, imagine going out with him. So he's coming and he's saying, you think he's saying, remember all the love, but you can't come with me either, and I can't stay. Oh, that'd be torture.
He's like a teenager in an emo band or something, isn't he?
Yeah.
I just want the hardship, the pain.
But I've just come to tell you that in through your window.
Yeah.
And now I'll go and write a poem about it.
Yes, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
Oh, golly. Yeah. Oh, that sounds really difficult for the wife, I have to say, in that moment. Though the fact that she's with the new king is, or at least the other contender for the kingship.
Yeah, and then later on she tires of it all when he turns up towards the end of his life, and she says, just leave. There are too many people around here who'd be embarrassed to see you, and it'd be too much of an embarrassment. That's the word she uses. So he leaves.
We haven't really talked much about, was he a bird? You said at the very beginning he was either a bird or he believed himself to be a bird. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's hard to say, because there are a few versions of this story, and in all of them he is cursed to become like a bird, to fly away like the spear that broke on the bell, to fly off and to be confined to the woods, and all the way through it. Then, so he initially at the Battle of Moirath, he elevates. He
Levitates.
He levitates and flies off. And at a couple of other times in the story, he levitates. And most of the time, he can leap from one side of a valley or a glound to the other. He can leap from tree to tree. So it's very much bird-like in that sense. And then when he has the battle, the leaping battle with the old crone who draws him back from his sanity, his refound sanity, back into his madness again. In the midway through the story, they leap all across the country, and she ends up leaping to her death from off the cliffs at Dunseverick, a huge high cliff there up in Antrim. And at a very late stage in the story, he mentions in the course of a poem that this was before my feathers grew. So
That's fascinating.
Did he have feathers? We don't know.
Or was he becoming a bird?
Yeah.
Was this part of his becoming?
Yes, it could be.
So he can leap and he can live in the woods like a wild thing, and then at some point he gets feathers.
Yeah. And then he has the same fears that a bird would have. He mentioned, this is mentioned by not just him in the poem, in the story, but others, that he flees like a bird. He avoids noise. He avoids bright lights, noisiness, human activity like a bird.
That's fascinating. There's a really profound juxtaposition, isn't there, between what it takes to be part of society or to be with people, and what for somebody like Sweeney, what was involved in him being true to his nature.
Yes.
And there's sort of an impossibility, isn't there?
There is, and he's yearning for human companionship all the time, and at various times he moves back to within range of people to speak with them and to converse with them and colloquy with them. And yet he can't be with them. Now, the longest time he spent with anyone was a year with a man called Alan, who was also similarly afflicted. And he was over in Britain. So when Sweeney went over to Scotland, which the western part of Scotland had been part of his kingdom of Dalriada, but he moved further south, right down into Britain, and he met this other mad man, and they got on together, and they spent the year together, living together, talking, and he finds out his name is Alan, and he was a high rank, like Sweeney, a high rank leader, and a great battle happened, and the noise and tumult of the battle drove him out of his wits, and he had to leave humanity. And like Sweeney, he knows how he's going to die and more or less when. And at a certain stage he says to Sweeney, right, it's time, I have to go, and he brings him to this great waterfall, a named waterfall, and goes there, and he said, when I go here I'll be blown off the top by a gust of wind and I drown in the waterfall, and that's what happens. Wow,
there's a lot in that. Ooh. So the first thing that strikes me is that from a modern day perspective, these are two men who've been driven mad by the battle.
Yeah.
Which is what we would now call PTSD, probably.
We would, yeah. And at times when Sweeney is brought back through the agency of his family and friends and loved ones, and he regains his sanity, for want of a better word, he loses it again when noises happen, when a hunt, at one stage he's nearly going to step out and back with them when he hears a hunt going on just through the woods, and he flees again. Yeah.
So the noise re-triggers him, is what we would, I think, say now.
Yeah.
And for some, there's a sense there, really, that in order to stay within the confines of the family and the society, he would have to be less sensitive.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking when I think of Alan and Sweeney. So they would have to somehow be numb to what was required to survive a battle, to be at a hunt.
Exactly. To be part of this new dispensation, the new religion as well, requires a lot of self-abnegation and control of emotions and feelings.
Mm.
And maybe that was part of his resistance, or his symbolic resistance to the new religion, the new order.
Yeah, and it's a big tangent maybe, but it does make me think about World War I in particular, because I had a grandfather who fought in World War I, and how anybody could have come out of it without PTSD. the only people who must have been able to come out of those kind of horrific experiences must have been unusually numbed.
Yeah, true.
Because it's beyond the normal realm of human experience to be in the middle of that. So it's entirely appropriate to have post-traumatic stress reaction to it. So maybe Sweeney and Alan just weren't able to numb themselves sufficiently.
Yeah. And maybe that's also why his poetry survives, his speech, the poems he writes, the lays he writes within this story.
Did he have poetry before? Or did he get poetry from being exiled?
That's interesting. I suppose he must have had some form of poetry before, because they did, but that'd be nice to think that he just discovered poetry in his wildness.
I think it might be true. It feels like it might be true. Sure, what else would you be doing if you're sitting in the trees, lamenting your wife who you can't actually stay with, but... Yeah. And I think it's telling, as we kind of touched on earlier, that this story is set at a time where society is changing dramatically. These are the origins of the society that we now live in.
Absolutely. The new order is coming in. The old order is not exactly dying, but changing. The old beliefs are going to slide under the new beliefs to be covered by a veneer, sometimes thin, sometimes thicker, of the new religion. One of the interesting things then to consider is that also Sweeney came from the landed, the powerful class, the upper echelon of society. This is not a rebel who is coming from the bottom up. He's someone who had all the power. He had the kingship of a good kingdom. He had power. He had wealth. He had great standing. He was handsome. He was strong, and much admired. And then his fall from grace. Then, so he's the person who's competing or rebelling or resisting this new order, which is an interesting symbol as well. This whole thing is full of symbolism, some of which we don't even get these days because it was created for people so long ago. So
he had a lot to lose. He wasn't just somebody, flinging pebbles at the incoming order. He actually had status and he lost it, and he was driven away from his standing and his family and his wealth.
Yes, yeah. He had it all.
He had it all. And there's also something in it for me about how this, as we've said, is a story told by the victors in essence. It's the victors who get to tell the tale. And looking from outside of Sweeney's life in at him, is there a way that by describing him as a bird, you get to put him down? You get to diminish him. He's a bird brain, or he's just flighty.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
a thing with nothing. Yeah, and at a time when status was everything and face was everything in that society, he had nothing.
And birds, while beautiful, are generally not seen to be particularly potent. They're not seen as powerful, and they can be, well, certainly within English, you can use it to put somebody down.
Yes, yeah.
Flighty, bird-brained.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wonder if part of the analysis of him is based on how to keep him small, how to keep him irrelevant.
Yes, yeah. Sweeney also knows how he's going to die, because that's part of the curse that Ronan lays upon him, the cleric Ronan, that he'll die by a spear, because it was Sweeney's spear that killed Ronan's men and broke the bell. Ronan was more upset by the damaged bell, I think, than his acolytes. But he condemns him to die at the point of a spear, which he later does.
So he knows, he lives with his death alongside him.
Yes. He goes to modern day Carlow and he finds the monastery of St. Mulling, who is a much more gentle, more reasonable kind of person, more Christian person, and he feels sorry for this poor creature and helps him. But obviously, he's still he's living in the trees and so on. But he's living in a thorn tree just beside the cell of the monk. But the monk Mulling instructs his herdsman, the wife of one of his herdsmen, to feed him, to give him some food morning and evening. So he won't come into the house to eat. So she goes out to where the cows come in to be milked, and each morning and evening she digs her heel into the cow dung and spins it round to make a deep bowl shape, and she pours the fresh milk into that, and then when she goes away, he comes out and laps it up. But the prediction...
That's amazing. I'm trying to visualise that.
I know.
There's something really beautiful about the feeding of the bird. You know, I think of people going out and scattering crumbs, and I'm thinking of my own hens and going out and giving them water, and it's often pretty muddy.
Yeah.
But there's something very bird-like about that, creating this little well
there is.
for him to drink from.
It's also quite it's a very caring thing to do with your own foot, you know, to dig your own foot into the cow dung and turn it to make that bowl for him, to allow him to have a good sup of milk.
It's almost, there's something in it about, there's a healing image in there for me about how he can't be with people, but that this woman's kindness and sort of very... maybe do I mean fecund act, but kind of like earthy act, can actually nourish him.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a way in which he can be nourished by human contact, but it has to be this kind of earthy, dungy process with the feet. He can't take a cup, he can't take a knife.
Yeah.
He can't go and sit in the hall and eat, but he can be nourished by this very earthy offering.
Yeah. And the prediction from Ronan was that he would die at the point of a spear. And what happens here then is that the wife, the herdsman's wife, whose name was Myrgil, or Bright Mary in a way is what it is, she's giving him this milk. But her husband becomes very jealous, and there's another woman who's whispering to the husband that she's given more attention to this mad fella, and she even implies that they've been together in the bush. So he's enraged and he grabs a spear, and while Sweeney is down on his hunkers lapping up the milk, he throws the spear at him, and it pierces right through him. And immediately Molling, the saint, the monk there, runs out and, cradling him, holds him as Sweeney passes on.
That's both beautiful and dreadful.
Isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
It's so dreadful that he was just coming close and taking some nourishment from another person.
I know.
And that exposed him to the anger and violence of the husband.
In a way, it's a perfect end to this incredible story.
Because I'm thinking of a bird kind of hesitantly trying to figure out if something is safe. You know, the way they kind of come in and then they go out, and then their heads go up and they go in and then they go out. And he had learned that this was safe, that he could take the milk. And then that herdsman throws a spear at him. Yeah. Sad and beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe just sad.
Well, there's a beauty in it too, as in the whole story. One of the beautiful things about this story is here we are, well over 1,000 years later, marvelling in it, talking about it, exulting in it. So in a way, Sweeney is like the thrush or the blackbird up on the hedge, singing so beautifully that he moves us. So all these years later, the rest are forgotten, but Sweeney is still singing loudly and beautifully.
And somehow that connects to his wildness and to his poetry.
Yeah. And
to his sensitivity. And that's what's endured.
Yes.
That's a really, really lovely way to leave it, I think, Paul. To think of him as a bird on a hedgerow singing his song. And I don't feel like I understand it, but maybe that would be too simple. It needs a little bit more sitting with, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, yeah.
It's quite the story.
Yeah.
But it certainly touches something in me, this story of this man who becomes a bird and goes to live in the woods and whose song has endured.
Yeah.
Into the Mythic is made possible by the generous support of Wild Goose Studios, a family-owned craft studio based in Kinsale, County Cork.